Good morning, MOMcon! Woo! I'm so excited to be with you guys right now. I can't even tell you, there is nowhere else on earth, anywhere I would want to be than right here, right now with you guys. I am a MOMcon super fan, okay? And I can prove it. I have been coming to MOMcon to speak here since 2012. You guys, that's 7 years. So I guess in MOPS years, I'm basically a second grader right now is what I'm saying. And the funny thing is though, when I come to MOMcon, more than anything else, they ask me to speak on one topic. And it's that topic that typically as moms, we'd rather just like shove under the corner of the rug along with all the crushed Cheerios, you know? The topic I've spoken on here more than anything else is mom anger. Yes, you guys, I am the resident MOMcon angry mom, okay? And I can prove it when we're setting up for my workshops in past years. I've heard the volunteers saying amongst themselves as they're getting the chairs ready and opening the doors, quick, here they come, the angry moms are coming, here come the angry moms. And I tell you, it's a lot more funny when it happens at a convention where it's a safe place than if it happens, say, you know, in your personal life on the side of a soccer field. As happened to me in Maryland a while back. I was at a soccer match for one of my sons. Maryland, yes, woo! I was at a soccer match for one of my sons, and there was that huge sea of humanity that happens when one game ends and before another game begins, and we're passing in the aisles, all these parents, and this woman just grabs me by my hands, looks me directly in my face, and at the top of her voice says, "Oh my gosh, it's you! You're the angry mom!" Which I assure you is not what you want to be called at the side of a child's sporting event, okay? But in all seriousness, I think that there are a lot of us who lie awake at night with this fear running through our minds, wondering to ourselves, am I the angry mom? Is that who I am? Because we're replaying the day's events in our mind and we're thinking once again, does having a bad day make me a bad mom? Because we remember that thing we said that we wish we hadn't, or that time we yelled again, or the time we threw something or slammed the door, and we lie in bed and we are afraid that our anger is going to define us. And what's much more scary than other people thinking of us as an angry mom is our kids growing up one day and remembering us as the angry mom. And so I'm here today to bring a story of hope to you and to myself. Because here's the thing, you guys, we believe in a God who makes all things new. And I want to share a story today I've never told at MOMcon or anywhere else. Because Revelation says they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And as we know, testimony is just a fancy way of saying story. So I am bringing you a story today, and I wanted to bring you a story from the perspective of a child who grew up in the home of an angry mom and what God did in her story. That child is me, and the angry mom was actually my dad. And I know you're thinking, wait, this is a convention for moms, but here's the thing, my dad is the original Mr. Mom. Because when I was 16, growing up in South Africa, one day after youth group, I walked out with my two brothers and I climbed in the back of our old green Volkswagen. And my dad turned around to let me and my brothers know that my mom had just been diagnosed with leukemia. And for the next 2 years, she would be in a hospital about an hour's drive from our house. And then in the last 4 months of her life, she'd be in a hospice until one beautiful spring day in South Africa, September 2nd. My dad walked into my teenage bedroom carrying the tiny blue suitcase that held all my mom's hospital belongings. And I looked at my dad and said, "What are you doing, Dad? Mom needs her stuff. Why have you got all her stuff here at home?" And he just stared at me as the tears ran down his face, and I knew then that she was gone. And that night, I sat outside my house on the front curb under the big acacia tree, and I said to Jesus, "What were you thinking? Why would you take my one safe parent and leave me with this man?" Because my dad, a lot like all of us, was a mishmash of highlight reel parenting stories that were amazing for Instagram, as well as a much darker version of the parenting story that we would rather shove under the rug. My dad is this amazing man who's a doctor and a preacher and a teacher and an elder in his church, and I can't remember him missing a single sporting event that I went to. Anytime I crossed the finish line at the 800-meter race, my father was standing there cheering me home, and I remember it vividly because I would be surrounded by his clouds of cologne as I was trying to gasp for air, saying, "Dad, back off, I can't breathe." He's the same person who, when I said I wanted to come to America to study, helped me research and apply to colleges in the US, and then packed me up and drove me to the airport and put me on a 16-hour plane ride away from him. I can't even imagine the kind of courage that takes. And as we stood at baggage to check in, he took one of those giant stickers that you put on a suitcase that says fragile, and he stuck it on his heart. And as I walked through customs waving goodbye to him, it's the last thing I remember seeing. But he's also the same man when I was a little girl and I played tea party with the China tea set that they had bought and I broke a cup. He scared me so badly I thought I was going to throw up from how hard he yelled at me. And he's the same man when I came home from the mall having gone to buy shoes and he thought I was going to get sneakers and instead I came home with completely impractical high heels, the way a teenage girl is going to do if you send her to the mall. He yelled at me so loud and so strong, and he called me words like selfish and prideful and uncaring, and at the peak of his rage, he ripped those shoes off my feet and threw them down the stairs and told me to go get out with your shoes. But, you guys, this is a hopeful story. It has sad parts, but the ending has been redeemed. Because we believe in a God who says in Revelations, "I sit on the throne and behold, I am making all things new." Notice how he says making, not made, not going to make. I am making currently. He is renewing us. And I have proof of that because in order to come and share this story today, I had to call my dad and ask him, my worst fear, would it be okay to stand on a stage of nearly 2,000 moms and tell them your worst parenting moment, Dad? And I brought with you a photograph of my dad today, and I recorded a bit of the message he left me so you could hear in his own words what he said when I asked that question.
Lisa, you have my absolute unqualified permission to say anything and mention the toughest moments. You're very welcome to do that. Because as you said, they've all been redeemed by Christ.
Christ redeems all of our stories, as Catherine shared so beautifully yesterday. But mine got tough before it got better. My mom died in September. In December, I went overseas to spend some time with her family. Let's admit it, I was running away from home and all the grief that was waiting there for me. And 5 months after my mom died, my dad phoned me while I was overseas to tell me he had met someone and he was getting married. And by the time I landed back in South Africa, he had sold the house I grew up in, got rid of all of my mom's belongings, and moved me into a new house with a new stepmom and a new stepbrother. As you can imagine, it's not the healthiest of situations. So shockingly, things went from bad to worse after that. But at the same time, God was doing a work in me. And I was looking to get baptized. I was 19 years old, and the night before my baptism, my father and I had one of the worst fights we'd ever had. And it's because his new stepwife felt in some way slighted that I had not come personally to invite her to the event. And I tried to explain to my dad, I assume she'll be there just like all the other family, but she was sitting downstairs in the car sulking. So my dad came up to the living room to insist that I come down to the car and plead with her to come to my baptism. And I quietly and silently refused. I remember the night vividly. It was a beautiful South African evening. The sky was black. The Southern Cross was low in the sky. My father and I were sitting in the living room in front of the fireplace, and he strode back and forth as I sat on the leather sofa. And he became more and more angry as I refused to give in to his irrational demand. And he started yelling at me and calling me every name in the book. And the bigger his anger got, the smaller I became in the tiny corner of that sofa. Until my father got right up in my face and, using the name of his own wife, because I'm named after my mom, Jo, he pointed his finger in my face and he said these words to me, his only daughter and firstborn. Lisa Jo, I spit in your face. And those words have echoed with me decades into the future until I was a mom with kids of my own, sitting on the carpet in my bedroom in Maryland, crying one day as I held those words in my hand. And I said to the Lord, is this who I am? Am I just the angry daughter of an angry father who will grow up to be an angry mother? And Jesus, as much as you can imagine him in your mind's eye, reached out his own giant, battered hands and placed them over mine and said, Lisa Jo, don't you remember that night? Don't you remember the night when all of those men screamed and swore at me? Don't you remember how I stepped in front of you and offered them my face and they spit in it? I did that for you because I want you to be free. That's the thing about our God. He is never done writing our story. He is making every single one of us new. And what my father and I didn't know all those years ago, that God would begin to make my father new from the inside out, which began with a complete deconstruction of his life and his faith. He lost everything that he held dear. That toxic marriage crumbled into tiny pieces. His kids scattered. I moved overseas and married an American and didn't see him for years. But God kept working in my father's life until he rebuilt him piece by piece, and he married a woman we love. And the two of them welcomed in by adoption 3 more kids. And over the years, I would have conversation after conversation with my dad as he shared about those children. And each conversation would end the same way. As he said to me, Lisa Jo, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't that kind of dad to you. I'm so sorry you were the first. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? And for years he wanted to be a pastor, even though God called him to be a doctor. And he told me decades later, it's as if God knew he had to just keep giving me kids because he had to just let me try over and over again. And as we all know, it's the greatest kind of preaching you can do, raising children. And so when you fast forward my story with my dad, who I love deeply, I arrived home in South Africa one year with my husband and my 3 children. And my husband and I were going away for the night, and we left our kids with my father and his amazing new wife. And I admit to being a little nervous because if any of you are familiar with my second-born son, Micah, we often run into problems when it comes to him. But I left, and when we returned, my dad met us at the door, said everything went great, however, had a little trouble with Micah. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I've heard that sentence a lot in my life from coaches and from teachers. And I felt a chill run up my spine as I was so nervous to hear what had happened. And my dad said, Micah lost his temper. And we had to tell him that that's not acceptable in our family. And so I said, and that's the part where I almost stopped listening because I was afraid. I thought he might say, and so he said words that shamed him or scared him or scarred him. But instead, my dad said, so we put him in timeout. And then he said this to me, but I was worried about the little guy. It's hard to be in timeout by yourself. And then my father, my Mr. Mom, he said, I walked into the bedroom and I sat down on the bed next to Micah and he said, my boy, your temper was a little out of control tonight. So you need to sit here for a little while till you're ready to be back with the family. But I tell you what, I'm just gonna sit here with you and we'll be in timeout together. That is the testimony of a God who makes our stories new. You are not an angry mom. You are who God says that you are. You are redeemed, you are made new, you are a daughter of the King, and you are a new creation in Christ. That is the legacy you get to take home with you. Because if you are willing, God will make you new. That is why, my dear sister moms, we can fear less because we believe in a God who is making all things, including angry moms, new again.